Great to be joined again by the Sheep Producers Australia CEO, Bonnie Skinner. Bonnie, how are you today?
Good, thank you, Ricky. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, good to catch you just before you head overseas for a major conference. And one of the things that's keeping you busy is the traceability in sheep.
Absolutely, yes. We're still continuing to work with federal government and other peak industry councils and other industry bodies on what exactly an implementation plan might look like for the rollout of national sheep EID. So keeping us very busy and very pleased to see some additional budget come through with the announcements last week from the Federal Minister.
What I'm pleased to see in some of the commentary around this from, I guess, government and major stakeholders is there is a continuing discussion about practicality and also just where the costs might be borne through the process, because those seem to be the big talking points.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's well understood, and certainly in the lead up to these decisions, we're very well understood that the biggest implication of moving to this system is the cost of resourcing it. You know, it is a significant cost to make that transition from individual to individual sheep identification. So, and that's borne by all levels of the supply chain, but particularly by producers who obviously have to pay for the tags. And that's not just during an implementation, that's on an ongoing basis. So getting to a place where we can understand what an equitable cost-sharing arrangement looks like to support the transition to this system is one of the biggest priorities for us as industry as part of these implementation discussions.
Now, you're heading overseas soon to represent Australia at a international conference. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. It's so SPA is a member of what's called the Global Sheep Producers Forum, which has really started up during COVID and sort of is a successor forum to the Tri-Lam initiative that SPA has been involved in was involved with for many years. And so the forum has membership from a variety of different sheep producing countries, and this will be the first time that we're coming together to meet to talk about global sustainability goals for the sheep industry, and also looking to reinvigorate the leadership program under that Global Sheep Forum banner, so the Next Generation Leadership Program. So we had an online forum for that last year, but we're looking to kick that off again and have the opportunity for young producers to come together in sort of a mentoring type of program. So very keen to discuss what that might look like going forward and meet with the other countries.
Yeah, it's certainly good that people can get together again after the last couple of years. You mentioned sustainability. We'll come back to that in a moment, but I do recall you mentioned when it came to biosecurity and the recent experiences South Africa had with foot and mouth disease, if I'm remembering correctly. That's been instructive for people around the world. I imagine that'll be a hot topic at that conference as well.
Absolutely. I think any opportunity to come together and take learnings from what can be quite unfortunate, obviously, experiences for those countries. I mean, we have to be building on that shared knowledge, and it helps countries like us with our preparedness activities to really understand firsthand what it's like to deal with these. Because as well prepared as we are, we're probably very lucky that we haven't been exposed to actually any real significant disease incursions here. So we need to make sure that we're understanding how we can improve wherever we can through the first-hand experiences of others.
Well, coming on to that sustainability topic, I'm sure under that banner comes the question of methane emissions, which, gets some people's back up a bit. But whether you like it or not, there is a push to reduce methane emissions, and the federal government has funded an initiative in South Australia of $1 million to put an additive into sheep troughs, so long as it's practical. What do we know about this initiative and generally about reducing the methane and footprint of our sheep flock?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly carbon neutrality and the effects of sheep production on the climate is a massive priority of Sheep Producers Australia, and it's a big focus area for our policy development at the moment. We've got a report that's just been developed now that sort of defines what actually our emissions intensity are as an industry, and so we're just taking a bit of a deeper dive into that to understand exactly, are we on track to meet the methane emissions reductions, the targets that have been set by 2030, and how we position to meet the targets to 2050. And sheep industry has benefited from years of improved productivity, in terms of the flock, but we also have ambitions to grow the flock and grow it sustainably. So how is that going to have an impact on those targets? And while we're well on track to meet or exceed our targets for 2030, getting to 2050 is going to be a little bit more challenging, and we're certainly going to be reliant on particularly the technological advancements that need to happen. And a big area of those technology improvements that need to happen come down to these emissions mitigation technologies that can be put in through feed, supplement and additives. And so this is an area that's probably had a bit more of a focus in the beef side to date. And so the investment that comes particularly through the South Australian government and as last week announced through the federal budget are really a great step forward and a really good initiative because it might show that it's going to be a significant pathway forward to help us reduce those emissions over time. So that's one area that we're looking at as part of those focuses. And of course, another part of the focus on reducing emissions comes around offsetting and, what are the ways that we can increase on-farm carbon sequestration and storage, and does that come through things like soil organic matter management, improving that management, tree planting and those other things. So industry is very much all over this and wanting to make sure that policy is informing some of these decisions that are being made at the federal level.
Now we're speaking with Bonnie Skinner, the CEO of Sheep Producers Australia. Those long-term targets, there's a good reason there's movement on them now to, I guess, ameliorate the effect on the climate. But in the immediate sense, the climate's been impacting sheep grazing communities, especially in regional New South Wales. We're seeing reports that about 1,000 sheep are being airlifted out of Forbes to avoid flooding. It is a serious animal welfare problem when it comes to flocks that are in flood-affected areas.
Absolutely. And this has always been, I guess, the concern of everyone in industry is the effects of a changing climate, and these floods are no exception. The unprecedented wet conditions that we've seen, particularly on the East Coast, and the impacts that can have on welfare, which is our primary concern at this stage. It's always very difficult in a flood situation to understand exactly what's happening at the ground at the time, and really important that producers know what emergency hotline numbers that they can contact if they need help for their livestock. We expect, with any increase in wet conditions is going to bring potential risk to animal health and welfare conditions. And so it's really important that stock are being monitored carefully and veterinary assistance is sought when required, as well as support that can be provided from local government agencies like Local Land Services, for example, in New South Wales. So it is really concerning and we're sort of waiting with bated breath to see what that impact might be and encourage any producers to reach out to those hotlines if they need immediate assistance.
All right, I'll give those hotline numbers in just a moment. Bonnie Skinner, the CEO of Sheep Producers Australia, thanks so much for joining us again on Flow.
Thanks for having me.
Some of those hotlines to contact include the Farmer Assistance Hotline from the Federal Agriculture Department, 13 23 16, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 local time. That's 13 23 16. Also in Victoria, the Flood Recovery Hotline, 1800 560 760, 1800 560 760. And for State Emergency Service Assistance, 132 500. And of course, if a matter is life-threatening, call 000.